was America's greatest composer. A man of cosmic vision. Light years ahead of his time. Charles Ives was America's greatest composer. Charles Ives. Charles Ives. Charles Ives. He was a mother. Hi, my name is Dave Frank. Thank you for tuning into my 18th online masterclass. We're coming to you tonight live from Harry, NYC, located at 140 West 30th Street in the heart of New York City. Tonight, I'm ecstatic to offer you a masterclass on the great American composer, Charles Ives. Although well known to modern music aficionados, the music of Charles Ives, for many, is unfamiliar. My intention tonight is to give you a basic introduction to the man and his music, and to explore some of Ives's musical concepts in the use of dissonance in modern music making. As usual, you might like to download the notes from this class at my website, www.davefrankjazz.com. Of all the great musicians I've had a chance to study in the preparation of the first 18 master classes, I found Charles Ives to be the most interesting of all. Living with his music on a daily basis for the last 2 months has changed my experience of music in a profound way. It's going to be a bit of a rough ride tonight as we delve into Ives's music. This is definitely an advanced master class. Let's fasten our seatbelts, open our ears, and have some real fun. Read along with me if you will. Charles Ives, 1874 to 1954, is America's greatest composer. His composed works include numerous pieces for piano, 4 symphonies, works for orchestra, violin sonatas, pieces for organ, choir, and string quartets. Part rebel, part rogue, part space traveler, and a total trailblazing genius, Charles Ives's music is an unexplainable adventure in wild dissonances, uneven rhythms, unexpected musical contrasts, and religious reverence. His unswerving commitment to breaking new ground in the exploration of sound and in following his unique musical path, despite the derision of the world around him, has left us with an incredible legacy of gorgeous, challenging music to enjoy and ponder. Tonight we will focus on his piano pieces in the light of his pioneering work in the use of dissonance to widen the musical palette of Western music. Because the person of Charles Ives is so interesting and unique, I'd like to share with you some of his life story, his own thoughts and words about the art of music, and some reminiscences of those who knew him. Charles Ives was born and raised in New England and spent his formative years in Connecticut and New York City. His father, the extraordinary George Ives, was a band leader, cornetist, and in his own right, a musical nonconformist and legendary character. Charles Ives studied composition at Yale from 1894 to 1898, and upon graduation moved to New York City and began his chosen career as a life insurance mogul. As a partner in the hugely successful firm of Ives and Merrick, Charles Ives was a pioneer not only in the world of music, but in the world of life insurance. He invented the use of actuarial tables to compute the amount of life insurance a person should carry, and was one of the first in his field to come up with the concept of estate planning. He married his wife Harmony and had a full family life, including an adopted daughter and a large extended family. He suffered a major heart attack in 1918 at the age of 44, in some part due to his excitable nature, and spent a good deal of his life after that point with serious health problems, including a heart condition, diabetes, and a type of palsy. A New Englander through and through, Ives was loved and revered by friends, family, and a small clique of musical contemporaries, including Aaron Copland, Henry Cowell, and Nicholas Slominski, for his generous nature, blazing musical genius, great exuberance in life and music, and for his wicked sense of humor. Ives spent most of his time after his retirement in 1930 in his home in West Reading, Connecticut, and died in 1954 of natural causes. Charles Ives was guided in his work by a singular vision, that the art of music should continually be exploring new possibilities in melody, harmony, and rhythm. He railed against the prevailing musical culture of his time, describing much of popular music and even much of the classics as a massage of the ears for soft-minded adding machines in suits that consider music as a business to please old ladies. I write my music, he said, in order to strengthen one's ear muscles, mind muscles, and perhaps soul muscles. Ives frequently repeated the phrase attributed to his father, "You won't get a wild, heroic ride to heaven on pretty little sounds." Let's explore some of Ives' concepts in using various degrees of dissonance in modern music. At first, these strange sounds may strike the ear as irritating and unpleasant, but we'll try to follow Ives' lead and see if we can find an expanded sense of musical beauty amongst the debris. One way to process these uncommon sounds is to think of them as expressing complex emotions. Using dissonances, a chord can be heard expressing, for example, suspense and hope, or gloom and exuberance, or any combination of emotions. It takes a little getting used to, but the rewards are many. We'll switch to a keyboard view so you can see the notes clearly. There are 4 basic dissonant intervals that you can use when creating music. Those intervals are a minor second, an augmented fourth, a major seventh, and a flatted ninth. A minor second interval looks and sounds like this. 2 notes directly together. That's a minor second interval. The augmented fourth, also called the flatted fifth, sounds like this. It's wider, but it still has a kind of a ominous type of sound. In the medieval times, this particular interval was called the devil's interval, and music was not allowed to be played or composed that had this interval in it. So you can be sure after hours, a lot of the monks were standing around playing this interval. It's also a real strong jazz interval. Thelonious Monk, people like that, would use the flatted fifth interval for dissonance in jazz. The major seventh interval sounds like this. Very strong and very dissonant. Yeah, very creepy. It is almost Halloween, so we can use this interval a lot coming up soon. Okay, the most dissonant interval is a flatted ninth. Sounds like this. How are your ears doing so far? Charles Ives would use these dissonances in various ways, and he would use them, for example, to create a mildly dissonant chord sometimes, like this. And here we have the major seventh on the top and bottom, and we have a major second interval in the middle. So this chord would be considered a mild dissonance, but if you use any one of these dissonant intervals in your chord, it's going to have some degree of dissonance. This could be kind of a jazz chord. It has that dissonance of the major seventh, or it could be something from Gershwin, for example. Here's another example of a mildly dissonant chord using our dissonant intervals. We have a nice little bite on the bottom, so to speak, with a minor second interval and then a perfect fourth. And this one again wouldn't be too dissonant for most people, but it still has a nice little bite to it. Here's another one that's a little more dissonant. That one has a minor second on the bottom and then a fourth above it. This is more dissonant. If we exclusively use the dissonant intervals, we can come up with stronger dissonances, which Charles Ives did quite frequently. Let's say if we put two minor second intervals together and played that chord, that's a very dissonant chord. Up an octave, it sounds a little different. You'll notice that we're thinking of creating chords not based on the fact that we're in the key of C or that it should follow a certain progression, but that we're simply thinking of using dissonant intervals together in different combinations. Here's another one that uses augmented fourths. Down an octave, it's even more dissonant. This one kind of sounds like right before a tornado. Still very expressive in its own way. You can try to hear the beauty in it. As Charles Ives said, it takes a while to get used to, but it really is rewarding for many of us to be able to open ourselves to these type of sounds and get used to them. Our next dissonant technique is called stacked intervals. Ives used this technique to create bigger dissonant chords. The way you use stacked intervals is you preset an interval, for example, a major or a minor third, and then you construct a big chord using this interval any way you like. Here's an example of a chord that uses major and minor thirds in stacked intervals. Very strongly dissonant. Up an octave, a little bit different. Ah, that's beautiful. Let's try another one. This is more dissonant. Here we have a minor third, a major third, a minor third, a major third, a major third, a minor third, and a major third. That's really strongly dissonant. And we'll try one more. Major third, minor third, minor third, minor third, major third, minor third. Also very strong. I'll explain how to use these to create music in just a moment, but I'd like you to hear these kind of crazy sounds and see if you can find the beauty in it. Yeah, very complex. Let's try stacking thirds and seconds. Here we have thirds in the left hand, seconds in the right hand. Automatically you get that kind of cringy feeling that tells you we're in Dissonantville. Woo! That's a strong one. Anytime you use seconds, it gets very tightly tense. Not so bad up here, more dissonant here. This is definitely horror movie territory. Let's try another one of seconds and thirds. Not as dissonant. But I'm just trying all kinds of different possibilities, and when I'm creating music, I can do anything to get the degree of tension that I want to get at any moment. Changing one note will vastly change your degree of tension. Here we're going to use one more of seconds and thirds stacked. That one's not so dissonant. It's a nice kind of a movie chord. Let's try thirds and fourths. Fourths on the bottom, fourth and a third. I like that one. It's nice when you hold them. You can really feel the complexity of the emotion that's conveyed by each of these chords when you hold them. Let's try another one with thirds and fourths. Yeah, that one's stronger. That's during a tornado. And we'll try one more. Whew, that's strong. That's a real good Ives chord. Sometimes you'd hit it percussively for added effect. Okay, one more, and that is just using seconds. This is the most dissonant of all. Whew! This chord is going to put hair on your teeth. Not so bad up an octave, but we created this amazing dissonance by stacking different seconds, major and minor seconds, together. And it can be very arbitrary. You can just try stacking them in any different kind of way, see what kind of dissonant sound you get, and choose the one that expresses just the right amount of tension for what you're looking for at that moment in the music. We'll try one more of these. That one I really like. That one's not so dissonant. Could be like a Debussy chord. Okay. That's the use of stacked intervals. An interesting concept. Next, we're going to look into the concept of bi-tonality. When Charles Ives was a boy, his father used to have him sing Swanee River, for example, in the key of C, and play an accompaniment in the key of A. That's kind of crazy. Most of us play, of course, most of the time, in the same key. This really sounds like a relief now. But if we, for example, play a melody in the key of D while playing the accompaniment in the key of C, it has a really nutty sound. And the further you get away from the key of C, in this case in the left hand, the more dissonant it becomes. So this is a nice example of C in the left hand and D in the right hand. Thank you, Charles Ives. Sometimes Charles Ives would play a melody that moved one measure in one key and the next measure in another key. Let's try the third in the right hand against the one in the left hand. The further you get away, the more dissonant it is. Yeah, it's a little bit like seasickness. But Charles Ives would use these kind of techniques to shock us and to get us out of hearing music the way we usually do. Why not? Now we're going to try the flat fifth, which is even more intense. Charles Ives would frequently hear where he lived in Connecticut, there would be two different bands playing at different parts of the park or different parts of a big field, let's say. And the two different bands would be playing totally different tunes in different keys at the same time. And Charles Ives' mind was such that he would put those two together, and a lot of the music he left for us is a musical picture of two bands playing at the same time in different keys. Let's try from the flat 6 on the right hand. And the last one is the most dissonant. Get ready for a nice 7 against 1. Woo! That is some strong stuff, man. Haha, fantastic. The last dissonant technique I'll share with you is called a 12-tone split. And Charles Ives would, again, use this one a lot. And this is when he really wanted to bring out all the guns of dissonance. What he would do is he would try to play all 12 notes of the chromatic scale together at the same time. Sometimes he'd play it all together, and sometimes he might break it up into a couple of groups. Playing 6 notes at the same time using 2 notes on the thumb is one way you can do this on the piano. So here's an example of 6 notes of the chromatic scale. Ah, lovely. Here's an example of the other 6 notes played in the right hand. Wow. Now, sometimes Charles Ives would play one and then answer it with the other. And there's subliminally, you're going to hear that all the notes of the chromatic scale are being used, but it's certainly an amazing sound to hear. Sometimes he would use it all together. Woo! Sometimes he might spread it out like this. It's not far off from the Schoenberg technique of 12-tone rows, but Charles Ives would do it usually in a much more thicker kind of a way. He would go through those 12 intervals much quicker. Woo! It's like a piano falling down the stairs. Yeah, Charles Ives was too much, man. Before we leave this mini clinic on using dissonances, I thought I'd show you some techniques of how you might put some dissonances together to create music, create compositions or improvisations. The most common way to do this is to let the melody guide the music. So we want to think of creating a melody using a combination of steps and leaps. Again, we're not thinking that we're playing in a certain key. This is definitely atonal. But it could be used in a tonal way too. Now what we want to use beneath the melody, in one instance we'll call a constant structure. Constant structure is when you have one structure like this, made up of some dissonant intervals, and you keep that structure the same and use it to support the melody, which is going to be on top and brought out louder. That's called constant structure. And Charles Ives would use that frequently to get dissonance sounding like music. In order to make music, you need ordered tones. And this is one way that you can order them in a non-traditional format. The other way I'd like to show you is called common tone. So we have constant structure where we use the same structure to make melodies. Now common tone is where we keep a lot of the notes of the chord the same, change it a little bit, and have the melody on the top, something like this. We can add melody notes and then use a lot of the same notes from chord to chord. This is called common tone, and we can use it to make these dissonances sound like music. Let's try a little bit more of it. We can use these dissonant techniques in many different ways when we're creating or improvising music. You can create a whole piece using these extremely dissonant textures. You can just use these dissonant textures and sounds for part of a piece. If you're scoring a film, for example, you can use the dissonant concepts in tense parts of the film. Your imagination is really the limit. So when you want to try to use some of these dissonant techniques, explore using different degrees of stacked intervals and use common tone and constant structure, and your ear will be absolutely revolutionized. Okay. Thank you for hanging in there with me. We're going to turn to some of Ives' music now and listen to some of his pieces in the order of increasing dissonance. I thought it would be fun to relate a little story about this dissonant music to you. When I was about 18, I was first exposed to these kind of sounds, and I used to spend hours at a time trying different stacked intervals and common tones and just having a ball. And I used to practice in the basement of the house where we're living on Long Island. And I remember having a 2-hour session of dissonant exploration, and I was thrilled and ecstatic about how it sounded and all the great sounds that I thought I was making. And I came up from the basement, and my mom was sitting at the kitchen table, and there were tears streaming down her cheeks. Yeah, the moral is you have to be careful about who you play these for. After that incident, they built me a studio in the basement where we had walls the thickness of Fort Knox. So she never had to listen to it again. But it is fun, and I think you'll have fun with it too. Okay, it's time to listen to Ives' music. The first piece we're going to listen to is called Invention in D, and this was written in 1898, and it was done as an assignment when Ives was in college at Yale, and the assignment was to write in the style of Bach. So what we're going to hear here is Ives writing in a conventional style, and this is how you know he's really a super genius, is that he could write conventionally beautifully as well as non-conventionally, which we'll hear soon. This piece has elements of imitation, counterpoint, 3-part inventions, and uses barbershop harmonies for a humorous effect. The music we'll be hearing tonight is from a great CD called The Unknown Ives. The pianist is the excellent contemporary pianist Donald Berman, who graciously acted as a consultant for this class. This CD contains lesser known and unknown, basically shorter pieces for the piano of Ives, and it's a great listen. Donald plays great on it, so I highly recommend it. So we're going to start with Invention in D, written by Charles Ives in 1898. Okay, kids, now we're going to go deeper into the pool with a composition called Waltz Rondo. This was written in 1911, which is unbelievable. This entire piece is a study in bi-tonality and chromaticism. The basic theme, repeated 7 times, has a repeated left-hand figure in the key of D. And in the right hand, the melody switches from D to D flat, measure by measure. This unusual waltz, an example of Ives's high humor, is intended to shatter our usual notions of melody and harmony, and includes quotes from popular and patriotic songs of the day. Waltz Rondo, 1911. Wow! Was that amazing? That was written in 1911. In our Lenny Tristano masterclass, I referred to Lenny as being very much ahead of his time and used the example of Da Vinci's notebooks, where you can see all kinds of beautiful art pictures, and all of a sudden you see a picture of a helicopter. And this was whenever Da Vinci lived, hundreds of years ago. He had thought of the helicopter all the way back then. And this was written again in 1911, before anybody in America was doing this kind of dissonance. And Charles Ives was just doing it for himself. He had almost no performances of his music during his time. Later on he had it, but while he was writing the music, he had almost no performances. And he was able to concentrate for 20 years and create this incredible music. Now we're going to listen to another piece of Ives, which is even more dissonant, if that's possible, called Cadenza Storm and Distress, from a larger piece called Over the Pavements. And this was written even earlier, in 1906. This piece is an example of atonality in Ives's music, and is guaranteed to have you calling out to your favorite deity in short order. This piece is a musical depiction of the cacophony of thousands of people walking down Wall Street, the varying paces naturally combining different tempos, speeds, and moods. This cadenza, which is what we're going to be listening to, is meant to depict the high point of the day, rush hour, in New York City. Cadenza, Storm and Distress, Charles Ives. Did you enjoy that? Could you find any beauty in it? I could. The next piece we're going to study takes us deep into the pool beyond the pool. Charles Ives' imagination for music went beyond the ordinary. He heard music in what he called quartertones. Usually when we're playing on a piano, we think of half steps or half tones as the normal mode of expression. Charles Ives imagined that there was another note in between the C and the C sharp. And he imagined this for all notes on the piano. He called this quartertone music, and the way he accomplished this was he had two different pianists playing two different pianos, and they were tuned a quarter step out of tune. We're going to listen to a mind-bending piece of Charles Ives from 1924 called Quartertone Piece Number 1. This piece introduces the idea of hearing music in different intervals than we in the West are used to. The use of quartertones, Ives felt, opens up huge areas of musical expression and unlimited emotional possibilities. Check this out. Charles Ives, Quartertone Piece Number 1. Two pianists. How did you dig that? That was wild. The last thing we're going to listen to tonight is a very unusual and rare recording of Charles Ives himself playing and singing a song he wrote called They Are There. This was recorded in 1943, and They Are There is a war song which Charles Ives wrote saluting the soldiers fighting in World War I. Ives's nephew related this story about the song. During the First World War, Uncle Charlie was so agitated about the peace movement that he wrote the song They Are There. He tried to get me to sing it, and if I didn't sing it with enough spirit or gusto, he would land both fists on the piano. "You've got to put more life in it," he'd say. There was one little passage that called for a real shout, but I shouted very timidly, and he nearly hit the roof. "Can't you shout any better than that? That's the trouble with this country. People are afraid to shout." The one and only Charles Ives playing and singing his own piece, They Are There. I've put the words on the screen so you could understand Ives's passion clearly.
There's a time in many a life when it's due to facing death, but our soldier boy will do their part that people can live in a world where all will have the same. Their conscience always of their country's aim, which is liberty for all. Hip hip hooray, you'll hear them say as they go to the fighting front. Brave boys are now in action. They are there, they will help to free the world. They are fighting for the right, but when it comes to might, they are there, they are there, they are there. The damn thief as the Allies beat up all our war hearts. The boys be there fighting hard, and then the world will shout the battle cry of freedom, chanting on a new campground. Chanting tonight, chanting on a new campground. For it's rally round the flag of the people's new free world, shouting the battle cry of freedom. When we're through this cursed war, all started by sneaking culture, making slaves of men, goddamn him. Then let all the people rise and stand together and brave kind humanity. Most wars are made by small, stupid, selfish boys and groups, while the people have no say. But there'll come a day, hip hip hooray, when they'll smash all dictators to the wall. Then it's build a people's world nation, hooray, every honest country free to live his own native life. They will stand for the right, but when it comes to might, they'll be there, they'll be there, they'll be there, you got that thief. And the people, not just politicians, will rule their own lands and lives, and you'll hear the whole universe shouting the battle cry of freedom, chanting on a new campground, chanting tonight, chanting on a new campground. For it's rally round the flag of the people's new free world, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
Wasn't that fantastic? Man, I love Charles Ives. What a personality. Doing all of this incredible creative work, basically completely on his own. Just incredible. I hope you enjoyed this evening as much as I have. I'd like to thank the great Melissa Kelly for her audio, video, and production help to get these classes on YouTube. I'd like to thank Donald Berman, the great pianist we heard, playing most of Ives' compositions, for his consulting on various aspects of this class. If this kind of thing floats your boat, there are 17 other tamer master classes available for free viewing on YouTube and Ustream. They include, and I love saying all these classes we've done, Lenny Tristano, Bill Evans, Liberace, the Marx Brothers, Oscar Peterson, An Afternoon with Dick Hyman, A Walking Bassline Clinic, Frank Zappa playing Outside the Changes, 15 stylistic elements for the advanced jazz pianist, The Grateful Dead, Eric Dolphy, Charlie Parker's, and others. If you have any questions, comments, complaints, or criticisms, you can reach me anytime at www.davefrankjazz.com. I want to especially thank all of you for putting up with this crazy hour. I had a ball, and please let me know what you think. Over and out from New York City, blessings, and keep swinging.